I'm Bruce Apar, and you're watching, well, if you have power, Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. Hello again, and this is Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog with a couple of modifications thanks to Hurricane Sandy, which of course has affected many millions of people. And not to make light of it, some people have been devastated by this natural disaster. And we wish everybody well, and our thoughts are with all of those people who are really going to have to quite literally dig out of a very big hole in their lives that has been created by the enormity of this event. And we are brought to you, as we always are, by the Penny Saver and by Chase Media Group. And we always take this moment to thank our CEO, Carla Chase, and Frank J. Rich, who cannot be with me today. Frank is my co-host. And the reason he's not here is for a very good reason, because he's cooking up a storm. Ooh, bad choice of words. Anyhow, he's cooking up a storm for all of the staff at Chase Media Group, and we'll be bringing them food, lunch, today. And, but there's no secrets here. We're recording this in the Cablevision Peekskill Studios on Friday, November 2, 2012. And I just headed over here from Yorktown on Route 202, and needless to say, the gas lines go almost as far as the eye can see. And I just want to mention that a lot has been made, and the election is coming up. You might be watching this before the election, you might be watching it after the election. In any case, a lot was made, of course, at the Republican convention of a very famous Hollywood icon, Clint Eastwood, talking to an empty chair that, in Clint's imaginative mind, was supposed to be President Obama. Well, Clint, you got nothing on me. I have 3 empty chairs, so take that. And I have to tell you that, without getting into the politics of Clint Eastwood, I really enjoy his movies. I mean, he's a really good filmmaker, and he's had not only an amazing career in Hollywood, he's had a unique career. There's nobody else quite like Clint Eastwood. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I'm getting a phone call. Hello? Hello? Oh, Mr. Eastwood. Hi. How are you? Oh, you watching the show? Really? I didn't know that you can get it there in Carmel, on the Monterey Peninsula, right? That's where you live. I know you were mayor of Carmel for a while, I think for one term. Yeah, no, I understand that, you had other things you had to do. That's fine. But what? You copyrighted the empty chair joke? Really? Oh, okay. Well, I'll have to refer that to our attorneys. I really didn't know about that. And, if we're offending you in some way, I'll ask my attorney whether or not I need to apologize to you, okay? All right, Mr. Eastwood, you take care of yourself now, and I hope to see you soon, maybe talking to an empty bed or something, for your sequel, for the sequel, that's all I meant. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, so long. Okay, well, that was Clint Eastwood. I don't know, he's a little bit, getting a little bit, I guess, doddering, as we say. But, we'll all be there. So I'm doing this, in case you haven't figured it out by now, I'm doing the show solo. And so, Hurricane Sandy, let's talk about Hurricane Sandy. As I said at the outset, it's, needless to say, it's an awful event in so many ways. But at the same time, I don't think life for any of us would be bearable if it wasn't for levity and humor, and that's why, as human beings, we always look for humor in our lives in the appropriate places. Of course, what's appropriate in terms of when humor should come into our lives is not the same for everybody. What may be appropriate for one person will be offensive to another person, and therein is what makes a horse race. So what I'm going to do for however many minutes I have left, probably 27 and a half or something like that, I did write a blog, and you can go to townlink.com to look at it. It's actually a new website that you should check out. And you could also go to ncnlocal.com and just look for Bruce the Blog. You know something, since Mr. Eastwood hung up on me, or whatever, I hung up on him, I'm going to take this bug out of my ear, because he put a bug in my ear, by the way. Okay. So what we're talking about is what good can we get out of something like Hurricane Sandy, which by all accounts, if we're to believe the news media, and do we have a choice, really, was a record-setting storm. The last one in New York City proper that was of this magnitude was 1938, we're told. So you're going back, 64 years. And what am I talking about? 74 years. Okay, to catch up on that math, Bruce. 74 years, there hasn't been a storm like this, at least in the metropolitan New York area. And so what I was trying to get at is, as terrible as it is for so many people, people still without power and without heat, and obviously that could be an endangerment to your life. That's not a joking matter. But there are other ways you can look at something like this to try and alleviate some of the misery. And so that's what I endeavored to do with this blog. And I thought about, if you do think about it, Sandy is like the Wicked Witch of the East, right? From the classic 1939 movie Wizard of Oz. This really was literally the Wicked Witch of the East that was visiting us. And so I have a whole list of things here that, as I say in the blog, at the end of the day, ours is a merciful, well, this was an act of you-know-who. And ours is a merciful you-know-who. So I'm going to enumerate how we can stitch together a silver lining from the mountains of mess that becloud our senses in the wake of this storm, okay? So now, for example, this is a cliche, but cliches are based on truth. Going through something like this, let's face it, builds character. And that's always a good aphorism to haul out in times of stress. But it does build character. And it renews acquaintances. I'll give you an example. So we still don't have power as of November 2, 2012. And so the last several days since Monday, 29th, when we lost power about 4 p.m., every night we've gone to a different neighbor. By some sheer coincidence, each of them have generators. So we would bring our own food or maybe share their food and vice versa, bring a bottle of wine, and enjoy our neighbors. So it helps renew acquaintances, and the way I put it is that neighbors with generators make you a friend with benefits, right? That's how I look at it. It also, interestingly enough, all the roads that were blocked by these trees and telephone lines that were crossing the road. Why did the telephone line cross the road? I don't know, ask the chicken. But it made me realize, there's new ways to navigate your way from your house to wherever you're going, to work or the store, and then back home again. And so that's another dividend. Who knew I'm driving home and I'm going, I have to figure out a different way. Who knew I could get home that way? I've only lived here 19 years. I never knew that. Now I know. Also, I like to go to the gym and stuff, but I found a new exercise. What I don't do at the gym is forearms. Everybody, macho guys, even as old as I am, I got to work on my biceps and my abs, as if I'm ever going to have a six-pack. But, well, I do have a six-pack. I go to the store and I buy one. But the thing about forearms that I don't do at the gym, well, now I have to open and close my garage door manually because I don't know if I mentioned this, but we have no electricity. So that, that really sort of, you feel it in the forearms. You can get some good flex action by opening and closing your garage door without having one of those little remote controls. The other thing is, what about batteries, right? There's a run on gas, there's a run on coffee, there's a run on batteries. And the funny thing is, I remember a long time ago when I was a cub reporter on that very popular magazine. I'm sure you used to get this. You probably subscribed to it. It was called Electronics Retailing. Yeah, there was a huge magazine, Electronics Retailing. And so I was assigned by my editor to do a thing about batteries, and I figured, what better headline to humanize it than Batteries and You? And that was the name of the article, Batteries and You. Now, the thing about batteries is that I think in times like this, when we need batteries, because there's no other source of energy really available within our grasp, we appreciate how functional batteries are. I mean, in fact, I'd call them the eighth wonder of the world. And then, along the same lines, when else do you ever hear about dry ice except in this kind of power outage? When people are trying to preserve their food, and so they buy dry ice and throw it in the freezer, and hopefully it'll preserve food that you spent a lot of money on. And so, dry ice actually was discovered, I don't know if you would say it's invented, it was discovered, because it's natural. Oh, you know something, Richard? I realize have I been looking at the wrong camera the whole time? Well, it's Sandy's fault. Geez, that damn storm. Okay. But dry ice is a 19th century discovery that still rocks. All right. Now here's another one, and this is really a much more serious observation, or at least the author likes to think so. He told me that. And that when something like this happens and people do have to pull together, you can easily pick out the class acts in your community. And why do I say that? Why do I say that? I don't know. Why don't you tell them? Okay, I will. Because, it's you have to admit, folks, it's counterintuitive as you're driving along local roads, whether they're major arteries, minor arteries, or in that vein. You're looking at traffic lights. Red, you stop. Green, you go. Orange, you go even faster, right? And so it's counterintuitive when there's no traffic lights to get to an intersection that's a main intersection and to stop for people on the cross streets who are trying to get onto your main intersection. But it's really heartening when you see people who stop to think, well, there's no traffic light and I need to stop even though I could keep going, and see if the person if there is a car and if that car is at the light, let them go first. Those are class acts, people who stop to think about those things. And then there's a couple of other examples along the same lines. The other day, I saw a Yorktown Ambulance Corps, which is on 202, right across from the Yorktown Jewish Center from FDR Park. And as I drove by, I could see the ambulance was in the driveway, and sure enough, as I kept going towards Yorktown Heights, I could see in my rearview mirror and hear the ambulance. So when I got over to Yorktown High School, which is at 202 on Granite Springs Road, I started to pull over to the shoulder because that's what you're supposed to do when there's an ambulance. Whether it's coming towards you or from in back of you, you're supposed to pull over to let the ambulance go because obviously it's either going to get somebody or it has somebody in it, and that's a lot more important than where you're going at that moment. So I did that, and the yo-yo in back of me starts honking. So of course, being a insecure American male, I got road rage. Road rage kicked in. It's sort of like natural steroids. Road rage kicks in like, oh, what are you doing? How come you're honking me? Don't you know I pulled over for the ambulance? So, of course, what do I do in my infinite wisdom? I slow down and I glare in the mirror as if to say, what do you want from my life? I slow down for an ambulance, okay? So that person, of course, starts honking me. And then when opens up to 2 lanes, zooms around me and pulls right in front of me, as if they're going to hit me and whatever. And then I said to myself, Bruce, don't sink to that level. So I calm myself down. So all I'm saying is not that I'm a class act, but that you should pull over when there's an ambulance coming, whether there's a power outage or not, obviously. And then the last one is, and this one I'll never quite understand, and again, has nothing to do whether there's a power outage or not. When the lighting conditions, when you're driving, are anything other than optimal, when it's overcast, or as skiers say, when it's flat conditions where it's harder to see the contours, put on your headlights. Now, actually, it's a state law, a New York state law, and other states, when there is precipitation, and actually specifically the law states if you're using your windshield wipers, then you must put on your headlights. Why? Because I don't know about you, but sometimes when I look in my rearview mirror, and if it's not really sunny, bright conditions, it doesn't matter the time of day, by the way, sometimes you really can't see somebody in your rearview mirror. If you're driving, under a cover of trees, a road that has a lot of trees on it, and you look in your rearview mirror, you don't necessarily see the car behind you that well, and that's why headlights are on cars, everybody. I think we pretty much know this, so that you could see the other car as much as for you to see the road. I would say the headlights are more important for you to see the other car. That's the first function. The second function is so you could see the road. But there's a lot of cases where if you don't have your headlights on, you could still make your way. You want to be able for other people to see you coming. What this has to do with Sandy, I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. No. Well, wait, maybe they'll answer me later. I don't know. And then another one is that, there's less traffic when you have a situation like this. So, if you really do have to go somewhere, you can more easily get there because there's less traffic. That's not always such a bad thing. And if you're somebody like me, and by the way, in my office yesterday, I went down to the lunchroom where we had our group lunch that our company, Carla Chase and Frank, very generously provided. We had great pizzas. And I walked down like this, and somebody said, "Are you cold?" And I said, "No, I'm affected. That's why I'm wearing it. I'm not cold, I'm affected. I'm a wannabe actor. I act at night, okay? Maybe that, if you act at night, are you like a vampire actor? I don't know. So what happens in a case like this when everything gets canceled? Well, if you're auditioning for a play, as I'm going to be doing, it gives you more time to go over your lines because the auditions were canceled. So now every night, by candlelight, I swear, by candlelight and by flashlight, I'll sit there with my anthology of Neil Simon and read The Father in Come Blow Your Horn, which was Neil Simon's first play, by the way. So I have more time to do that now, to brush up. If I don't get the part, then I guess it didn't work. And it's still Sandy's fault. And let's see, okay, so that's more auditions. Oh, and also I want to, shameless promotion time. Shameless promotion time. Casey Morabito of WHUD does a great job. She's a great morning personality, along with Mike Bennett on HUD. They're the morning disc jockeys, as we used to call them. Casey has very kindly offered to put two of our recent hand-to-mouth players, that's the name of the company, hand-to-mouth players, has offered to put two of our radio plays on radio. What a concept. So she picked two of them because they're more manageable and shorter. We're going to be recording them at the HUD studios on November 12th, thanks to Casey. And it's Telltale Heart, the Edgar Allan Poe horror story, and the other one is Who's on First. Now, there were like 7 radio shows we did as part of this old-time radio show production that we put on recently. And it just so happens I'm in both Telltale Heart with a small role, and then in Who's on First, I play the Lou Costello part, and my friend Gary Simon, Dr. Simon, he's a dentist, plays the Bud Abbott part. So we're going to record those, and they'll be in HUD, which is pretty cool. Let's see. Oh, something else that we can glean a little bit of, maybe positive karma from even something as devastating as Sandy is that, think about it, you sort of save money in one sense, out-of-pocket money, because in the beginning, until power gets back to stores and stuff, there's not too many places to spend your money. And I know that sort of sounds a little silly when you think about the fact that a lot of us have to spend a lot more money restoring homes and repairing and stuff like that. But again, it's supposed to be a little tongue-in-cheek observation. So that's why my tongue is in my cheek. And then, but again, on a more serious note, times like this, when you see local businesses that get back up immediately or for some reason maybe are able to stay open even throughout the storm, but the ones especially who work really hard to get their business back open, it's their livelihood, but they're also serving the community. You really appreciate local businesses in times like this. And as they start to come back on stream, it's actually almost an exhilarating feeling that you don't have to travel, way out of your town to go get a cup of coffee, as I was doing for a couple of days. A lot of people were doing. Also, isn't it funny how Halloween and Election Day are like within a week of each other? There's something going on there that's very metaphysical. And at least for a couple of days, we were spared. Not that every campaign is like this, but there seems to be an increase in this negative campaigning, and we were spared having to listen to fact attacks, I call them, fact attacks, where they take information and distort it to such an extent simply to attack their opponent. You start to tune it out anyhow, and you don't even listen to it anymore. But at least we were spared a couple of days of that. It also helps develop patience, right? It improves your night vision, right? Like a bat or a vampire, to bring vampires back into it, Halloween theme. You have to get really good when you have no lights at finding things in the dark so you don't show up at work with two different pair of shoes on, or a slipper and a boot, or some crazy combination of clothing that just doesn't look really politically correct in the workplace. And then, of course, we all know about the early Thanksgiving. It's an early Thanksgiving because what this does, it frees up a lot of valuable hours that you can catch up on listening to the radio, rediscovering radio, or podcasts. I like to listen to podcasts in the car, or reading, or calling back people while you're waiting in a gas line. So that's another example. The other thing is, as I was mentioning, we were sort of house hopping, very generous neighbors, and actually, I know this is public access and we have to be careful about certain commercial plugs, but I'm just going to mention my neighbors' names. That's not a commercial plug. Jay and Carol Dotson, Sue and Jack McCarthy, Rich and Marie King, each of these people that live a couple of houses from us in our cul-de-sac. And I didn't even take French in high school. Pretty good, huh? They were very generous and very warm and very obviously receptive, and we've been going over there the recent nights, and it seems for some reason that wine tastes better in the dark when you really are sort of limited in things you could do. Which even when, those of you who know anything about generators, I have one, you don't exactly light up the world with a generator. You have to be very prudent about how you apportion the energy from the generator to certain things in your home. And so, for some reason, wine really comes into play. And so, in vino veritas, as my friends Tom and John DiChiaro, owners of the winery, will say, in vino veritas, in wine there is truth. And the thing you learn is that wine pairs particularly well with fishing for something to do, or with a romantic meet, M-E-E-T. That was like a rim shot, But boom. The other thing is, there's such a thing, it seems to me, as a Sandy palindrome. A palindrome is, one of them is, was referring to Napoleon. Able was I ere I saw Elba, right? Able was I ere I saw Elba. You can search for it, whether it's Google or some other search engine. A palindrome, and that's one of the famous ones, most famous ones, that reads exactly the same way forwards and backwards. Another one is a man, a plan, a canal, Panama. That's pretty cool, huh? A man, a plan, a canal, Panama. If you read that backwards, it says exactly the same thing. So now this is a different kind of a palindrome, but it still is a palindrome. A Sandy palindrome. You know the expression, storm the barricade, or like from the French Revolution, storm the barricade, or from Of course, the most famous document of the French Revolution, I think we all know, is the musical Les Miserables, right? Storm the barricade, but in a case like Sandy, it's like barricade the storm, right? So to me, that's a palindrome, and I guess I'm droming on, right? And then power to the people. Here's another one, power to the people. And this is really true. You know, there's a sensation, a metaphor that I'll get to after I state this part of it, that as you see, I just mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, and I think it was during the same show, right? Was it during the show or another show I mentioned it? I think it was this show I mentioned, stop interrupting me. I think I mentioned that you really almost have a sense of exhilaration when you go through a certain form of suffering, and everybody has different levels of suffering. We're actually very fortunate where we are, very fortunate. Other people are suffering hellishly. But as the suffering starts to subside in different ways for whatever reasons, there is a sense of exhilaration as life returns to some sense of normalcy, which, by the way, isn't really a word. I think President Wilson, or I think it was President Wilson, once used that, and then it became a word. He sort of misspoke, and then it became a word, normalcy. Or maybe it was Taft or Wilson, or one of those presidents a century ago. And so you see lights again at stores in town, and hopefully gas returning to the gas stations where it belongs until it gets into your tank. And you sort of feel like, oh, this is, you know, it's a good feeling. And what's that like? Well, it's like the proverbial, if you want to simulate, you know, this feeling even when there isn't a disaster, this is what I'm going to tell you should do. You should go and bang your head against the wall, and then when you're ready to experience a certain kind of rapture, stop banging your head against the wall. And you'll go, wow, that feels great. Well, that's what it's like when you go through this kind of a situation, and then things start to get back to normal the way that you're used to them, and whatever your comfort level may be. And so, oh, too bad. I just was told by our director, Richard Redmond, that there's only 2 minutes left, and that's really too bad because I ran out of bullet points. What a coincidence. But again, I want to put a postscript on this show and tell you that in all seriousness, our thoughts at Chase Media Group and the Penny Saver, my personal thoughts, and those are my family, and I certainly know the same with Carla Chase and Frank J. Rich, are with everybody who has to get back, has to find some way to get back to a normal life. This was, unfortunately, a historic natural disaster, an act of God. The one thing I'll leave you with is we were talking about this last night with our neighbors. Like, when I was growing up on Long Island in the 60s, and I remember very well the 1965 blackout, and there was a movie that was made, Where Were You When the Lights Went Out? That was a famous blackout, 1965. But the point is, I remember that because it was such a rare occurrence. Now, how is it that 50 years later, that these things, power outages, and I'm really glad I moved to Westchester. Long Island's a great place, but we love living in Westchester. We love living up here. That these things happen more and more frequently now. How does that make sense? With all the technological progress that we've experienced, how can it be that power outages happen more frequently and take much longer to restore power? That part I don't quite get. Anyhow, thank you for watching. Thank you for bearing with me. And we look forward to being with you next time when Frank J. Rich will be here, and we'll have our usual coterie of guests. And once again, when Bruce the Blog listens, people talk, including Bruce the Blog. Thank you for watching.